Thank you for joining me for the 5 habits of spiritual growth. Here's what you're going to learn as we go through these 5 habits together. You're going to learn how to be a self-feeder. What's a self-feeder? A self-feeder is an individual who takes personal responsibility for their own spiritual growth. There's 3 things I really want you to know, 3 facts about spiritual growth that are vitally important. Number 1, spiritual growth is not automatic. In other words, just because you've given your heart to Christ and made a decision, does not mean that you automatically grow in God. Fact number 2, it's a process. In other words, it happens over a period of time. The law of process says this: people develop daily, not in a day. So at the end of our time, it's not like we've waved a magic wand over you and you're automatically fully developed as a spiritual person. It's a continual process. Fact number 3, spiritual growth takes discipline. An unpopular word, but a very important word, that we bring our life under rigorous discipline and make ourselves conform to what God says we are, what we can be, and what we can accomplish. Here's what he says to the Colossians. Here's what Paul says to the Colossians in chapter 3. He says, you have put off the old self with its habits. See, he says, you've done this. This is a discipline that you've adopted. And you have put on the new self. You've put on a brand new life, which God, its creator, God created this new life for us. He's continually renewing in his own image to bring you to a full knowledge of himself. You're an active participant in your own spiritual growth. Spiritual growth isn't something that happens to you. It happens in you and with you as you cooperate with God. So buckle up. Let's take this journey together. Here we go. The habit of worship is an incredibly vital element of your spiritual growth. I love this quote from Eugene Patterson. It paints an amazing picture to me of what worship is and how we have to take our eyes off of ourselves and focus on God. Here's what Eugene Patterson says worship is. Worship is the strategy by which we interrupt our preoccupation with ourselves and attend to the presence of God. Jesus said this in John chapter 4. God is a spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth. I want to give you 7 truths about worship. Truth number 1, worship is led. The psalmist said this: I always was at the head of the worshiping crowd, right out in front, leading them all, eager to arrive and worship, shouting praises, singing thanksgiving to God. What does it mean to be out front in the worshiping crowd? Here's what I think it means. It means that our worship isn't just dependent on what happens from the platform. You can lead a life of worship. When we gather together for worship services, for Sunday, whatever day of the week that we're here, there, worshiping, it isn't just up to our worship leaders, our worship pastors to lead us. I want you to begin to say, hey, you know what? I can lead. I can get there early. I don't have to stay at the back. I can go out of my comfort zone and further our entire worship experience by actually engaging, leading that. See, worship isn't just led from the platform, it's led from our hearts. It's something we do when we're on our way to work. It's something that we do when we're home preparing our meal. It involves music sometimes, and that's the primary avenue that I'm talking to you about, but it involves our entire aspect of life. Listen to what Paul says to the Romans. Take your everyday, ordinary life. You're sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around, and place it to God, in front of God, as an offering. This is what worship is. It is to be led by us and to be cultivated by us. Truth number 2, worship is a reflection of spiritual health. Where there is a healthy soul, you'll find a life that is filled with praise and adoration for God. See, out of the healthy soul emanates this passion for God that must be expressed. It represents a healthy you. See, I want you to take responsibility for a worshipful environment in your home. I want you to accept the responsibility for adding an element of the worshipful environment to your church. See, if we see worship as a way of life, then healthy people will come ready to worship Monday through Saturday and having a life that is filled with the fullness of God. Truth number 3. Worship focuses on who God is. Hebrews chapter 4 says this, "Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence." See, if worship was about us, and I don't know about you, but I don't want worship to be about me, how could we approach worship with confidence? What do I mean? Well, examine your heart, examine your life, examine your day-to-day activities. There are things inside of each of us that fall short of God's best. And when we worship from a place that says worship is about me, there's no way that we can come to God with confidence. But when we understand that worship is about our Creator, when we focus on what is right inside of Him rather than what is wrong inside of us, it's much easier to approach His throne. To have in our hearts and minds, God is good. That is why I worship. God is worthy of my praise. I'm not necessarily worthy. I don't have it all together, but God has made me clean through His sacrifice, through Jesus Christ, and He is worthy of all of my praise. The next thing, number 4, worship changes the atmosphere of your life. Have you ever walked into a service where there's praise and worship and you can just sense the presence of God? There's something tangible in the atmosphere, a charging of the room where people are worshipful, where they're worshiping in song. That same change of environment can exist in your everyday life. It isn't just public worship when we're all together as a church that changes the atmosphere of our life. It is worship in the personal times that can absolutely alter what's going on. Change a bad day into a good day. A difficult circumstance into one that you can properly navigate through with hope and joy. Right in the middle of your day, making a point to say, you know what, I know that worship will change this situation, so I'm going to focus on who God is and do what the psalmist says in Psalm 16. I will bless the Lord who has given me counsel, yet my heart instructs me in the night seasons. See, we don't just worship in good seasons, in high times, but we worship in difficult seasons as well, in our night seasons. Truth number 5 says this: worship comes from a revelation of who Jesus is. Jesus having a conversation with the woman at the well. This is when he says these words. This is who he's speaking to. After he reveals who he is to this woman, he says, out of this revelation, out of this understanding, out of this clarity, will you be able to worship in spirit and in truth. In other words, in order to worship God fully, in order to do this wholeheartedly, it comes from a personal revelation of who Jesus is. Number 6, worship has a generational impact. The psalmist in Psalm 145 says this: "One generation commends your works to another. They tell of your mighty acts." I love watching young people learn to worship. I love to hear the crazy music that they come up with and that they love. I have 4 children and their style of music is way different than mine, but sometimes their style is forced upon me. And I've grown to kind of enjoy the differences that they have from what I have. One frustration that I have oftentimes is there is a generational divide that's created through worship music. Through any kind of music, really, but through worship music especially. We get stuck and say, well, this is the way it was when I was coming up. This is the way worship is supposed to be. But see, listen, music and worship to God is not just about a style or a genre. Remember, it focuses on who Jesus is. And we ought to worship Him no matter whether it's our favorite style or not. But to remember that at the heart of this is the one who has ransomed us and saved us from our sin. Now, I think the opposite is true as well. I think the young people ought to be taught some of the older songs, not to lose the importance of the hymns. Here's the main thing. Worship should reach multi-generationally. It should have a generational impact. Truth number 7. Worship is a unifier. Worship should unify and bring us together and bring united blessing. It's at stake. It's that stake in the ground that it's an irrefutable truth that this is what unifies us, our love for God and us doing our very best to express our worship to Him. Psalm 133 says this: "How blessed are those who dwell in unity." Our church and our churches must be an environment of worship. But most importantly, let us never forget that worship is about who we worship, not how we worship. These truths will help you grow. I hope you do something today. Put on a music form that you enjoy, some type of worship that feeds your soul and helps you do these steps. So make sure that you grow in the habit of worship. We just learned about living a life filled with worship. Let me give you some action steps. I love this habit. It is one of my favorite habits that I cultivate on a regular basis, and I want to help you cultivate this habit. So here's what we've done. We have created a process on our Facebook page that allows you to have access to the artists and song title that we've performed or that we have worshiped to together in a weekend worship experience. You can go to the YouTube page. There's all kinds of links on the Facebook page to help you understand more about that particular song and that particular style. You may want to find another style that more adequately suits you. Please do that. The second way that you can apply what you just learned is you can go to our website. You can go to morelifechurch.com/worship. And there's a growing list of resources that we're providing to you to help you as you grow in the habit of worship. Remember, don't just be hearers of the word, be doers.